Today we want to talk about our commitment to fight the climate crisis. This is one of the, if not the most serious crises that we're dealing with. While we have been grappling with the global pandemic, the climate crisis has not gone away, and if anything, it's getting worse. We're seeing the record changes in the climate impacting us right now in our lives. People are being devastated by forest fires across the country. We have seen heat waves, and we have seen the impacts of flooding. The climate crisis is here, but we can still fight it. We will not be able to fight it, though, with another 4 years of Justin Trudeau, who has been an abysmal failure on the climate crisis. And I don't say that lightly. I'm sad to say this because I want us to win this fight, and I know we can. I know we can beat the climate crisis. We can fight it and we can win, but we certainly cannot win when Justin Trudeau is more interested in the past year in meeting with oil lobbyists and oil and gas lobbyists than actually doing what it takes to fight this crisis. We've learned that over the past year, he's had over 250 meetings with the oil and gas lobby, which is, for folks that recall, the most since 2011, when the oil and gas lobby had a cozy relationship with Mr. Harper. And it reflects in the decisions he's making. He promised to end fossil fuel subsidies and instead increase them by $900 million. He sets targets and continues to miss them. And the thing is, this is where Mr. Trudeau's failed promises or his broken word, or when he says things all for show and doesn't deliver, this is where it hurts us the most, because the impact is we are not doing our part to fight the climate crisis. Emissions continue to go up. We are seeing the impacts of those emissions, and it is hurting us. The entire community of Lytton was wiped out because of a forest fire caused by the climate crisis. So we know the impacts are hurting us right now. So our plan is to fight this climate crisis like we really want to win it. And one of those plans is to double the fund that's used to invest in public transit in municipalities across our country. Right now that fund is at $2.2 billion. We want to double it to $4.4 billion. And that would help us invest in more public transit, electrify the fleets, make it more affordable and accessible for communities to access public transit, and make sure that we do our part to reduce our emissions. We know that transportation is one of the largest causes of emissions, and by investing in public transit, investing in electrifying it, we can reduce our emissions significantly. I want to thank you all for being here again. Donc en français, je veux dire que ce qu'on a vu dans cette pandémie, c'était les autres crises n'ont pas disparu. Et une des crises les plus sérieuses, c'était la crise climatique. Et on a vu les impacts de cette crise dans notre vie maintenant. On a vu les impacts des feux de forêt, des canicules. On a vu des communautés entièrement détruites par les feux de forêt causés par le changement climatique. Donc, on doit faire face à cette crise et on peut faire face à cette crise, mais on ne peut pas agir avec une 4 ans de plus de Justin Trudeau qui donne des belles paroles, oui, mais ses actions ne suivent pas ses paroles et la réalité c'est qu'il a le pire bilan dans tous les pays G7. Il continue d'augmenter les émissions au lieu de les réduire. Elle a dit qu'il va arrêter ou éliminer les subventions aux pétrolières, mais au lieu de ça, il a augmenté les subventions au lieu de les éliminer. Donc notre proposition, c'est d'augmenter un élément de notre plan de faire face à cette crise climatique, c'est d'augmenter le fonds pour investir dans les municipalités, dans les transports en commun. Donc on propose de doubler le montant permanemment pour investir dans le transport en commun, pour électrifier le transport, pour rendre l'accès au transport en commun plus facile et plus abordable et même gratuit dans les cas. On peut faire face à cette crise, mais vous avez un choix de voter pour Justin Trudeau qui a manqué chaque cible qu'il a proposée, ou l'NPD qui vont prendre au sérieux cette crise et qui vont faire face à la crise climatique dans une manière où on gagne et on fait notre part pour bâtir un meilleur avenir pour nos enfants. Et c'est exactement ce qu'on va faire. Merci beaucoup. Thank you so much. With that, I'm ready for any questions you might have.
First question, Christian Ajikte from CTV News. Good morning, Mr. Singh. I want to ask you first off what you thought of the protests yesterday with Liberal leader Justin Trudeau and gravel getting thrown at him in London as he was getting back on the bus. Does this speak to the state of where we're at in this election? And what do you want to say to those protesters?
I think first of all, what happened is horrible. That should never have happened, and I'm worried about Mr. Trudeau, his family that may be on the bus, the media, the volunteers, his team. That should never happen. It is absolutely wrong, and I want to highlight there are a handful, a small percentage of very troubled people that are violently attacking people just for their views. Like, I disagree with Mr. Trudeau all the time, but it is absolutely wrong to be throwing stones. I mean, I can't imagine that I'm saying this in 2021, don't throw stones at people because you disagree with them. That is basic. That should not be happening. But these are some clearly troubled people who think it's okay to throw stones at someone. But they have to be taken seriously. So we got to make sure we're doing everything we can to keep our team safe. We've got to assess the security before we do an event. Sadly, because of people like this who are causing a real threat to the media that comes with us on the tour, to our volunteers, to our staff, to our team. This cannot happen, and we've got to be very careful that we don't allow us to be in a situation where this happens again.
En français, s'il te plaît.
C'est complètement inacceptable, c'est inexcusable que les gens ont effectivement fait des violences contre M. Trudeau et son équipe et les médias avec lui. C'est complètement inacceptable. On peut manifester, c'est le droit, mais il y a des gens qui ont clairement des problèmes de santé mentale, qui pensent que c'est d'accord de jeter quelque chose à quelqu'un pour le blesser. C'est complètement inacceptable et j'encourage toutes les équipes de faire une analyse sécuritaire pour savoir si on peut avoir des événements dans une manière sécuritaire pour protéger pas seulement notre équipe, nos bénévoles, mais aussi les médias qui sont avec nous, parce que la violence dans ce cas était aussi dirigée vers les médias aussi, et j'ai des grandes inquiétudes par rapport à ça. Donc on doit avoir la capacité de faire la campagne, mais on doit le faire dans une manière sécuritaire, et c'est complètement inacceptable ce qui se passe avec ces manifestants.
And my follow-up, Mr. Singh, no disrespect, but today's announcement seems a little light in terms of what you want to do to reduce emissions in Canada. I know you have other plans. There must be a little bit more that you want to add on with regards to reducing emissions in Canada.
Well, really, we want to put the choice to Canadians, and this is one of the most serious crises. And when we're seeing this serious crisis, we've got to take some concrete steps. We propose one of those today, investing in public transit. We know it's important. But I really want to put out this call to Canadians. We have seen Mr. Trudeau make a lot of big promises and not back them up. But one of those promises that has hurt us the most has been his promises around the environment. He came in sounding really different in 2015, and it seemed like a breath of fresh air. But he has the worst track record of every country in the G7 when it comes to emissions. He sets targets and misses them. He says he's going to end fossil fuel subsidies, and instead of ending them, he increases them. He puts in a price on pollution, but exempts the biggest polluters. He has failed abysmally when it comes to fighting the environmental crisis that we're up against. And it is sad. And I think about what that means to the young people that are standing with me today that are so desperate. In some cases, they're worried about what's the point of even investing in our future when we don't know what that future is going to look like. I met kids who were saying, I don't even want to go to school. I don't want to pursue a post-secondary education because what's the point? What's going to happen to the planet? I don't want to pursue the thought of even having a family because I don't know what type of future my kid's going to grow up into. And I think about that for my own kid. And I can't imagine that Mr. Trudeau gets up and says he's going to do something about the climate and then continues to increase emissions. And he meets with the oil and gas lobby so many times that it's as much as when it was at its highest with Mr. Harper. So it's clear if you want to choose to fight this climate crisis in this election, you can't choose another 4 years of Mr. Trudeau, who simply doesn't make this a priority and does the opposite of what he says. Promises to reduce emissions, increases them. That's not going to help us. In fact, that's hurting us. And I'm saying to you, you can vote for New Democrats. We care, and we're going to fight this crisis with everything we have.
Next question, David Thurton from CBC News.
Hey, Mr. Singh, very
Hey
good
there.
to see you again
Good to see you.
today.
Yeah.
For the last couple of days, Justin Trudeau has attacked the NDP's climate plan. He says that it is less credible than the Conservative plan. So I'm wondering, what is your response to that? And also, when you read the plan, I haven't seen any proposal from the NDP to increase the price on carbon to meet your goals of reducing emissions by 50%. So what would be the price on carbon that the NDP would charge big emitters, consumers, in order to meet your goal of reducing emissions by 50%?
Well, the big difference is we've got 6 years of evidence. Mr. Trudeau can say all he wants, and he does that. I want folks to remember he said a whole bunch of things in 2019, just 2 years ago. And he breaks those commitments. And it hurts people. And in this case, what happens, he makes a big commitment, says a big plan about fighting the climate crisis. And then we've seen year over year emissions go up. So what's the point of supporting someone who claims to have a plan that works when we've got the evidence of him being in power for 6 years and completely and utterly failing to meet any of his targets? What's the point? He could have the best plan in the world, but he had 6 years to do something about it, and he didn't. We had 2 more years on this mandate, and instead of using those 2 more years to fight the climate crisis, he didn't. We have the evidence in front of us. Mr. Trudeau cannot be believed on fighting the climate crisis. One of the biggest things that we're going to do is, while Mr. Trudeau exempted the biggest polluters on his plan to fight the climate crisis, we're not going to exempt them. We're going to make sure that they pay their fair share. We're not going to allow the biggest polluters, the biggest emitters to be exempted. We're going to make sure that they're contributing fairly so that we can tackle this climate crisis. We know we can do it. I have so much hope for the future, but only if we make different choices. And the only way to do that is to vote differently. We can't vote the same way and expect the same results. You have to vote differently, and I encourage everyone to get out and vote. This Friday is advanced polls, so get out, find a plan, and get out and vote.
En français, s'il te plaît.
On a la preuve devant nous. Justin Trudeau peut montrer aucun plan comme il veut maintenant. Mais on a vu dans le passé, il fait la même chose. Il donne des grandes paroles, des belles paroles. Il donne des bons plans. Mais on a 600 de preuves quand il était Premier ministre. Qu'est-ce qu'il a fait? Il a manqué chaque cible. Au lieu de réduire les émissions, il les a augmentées. Donc, comment on peut croire dans ses propos maintenant quand on a vu déjà ce qu'il fait comme Premier ministre? Il a manqué chaque cible. Au lieu d'arrêter ou éliminer les subventions aux pétrolières, il les a augmentées à 900 millions de dollars. Il a mis un prix sur la pollution, mais il a exempté les plus grands pollueurs. Donc à chaque fois, il a dit quelque chose pour faire face à la crise climatique. Effectivement, il a fait l'opposé. Et ça a blessé les gens parce que la crise climatique continue, les émissions augmentent et ça a un impact négatif sur notre planète, sur notre environnement. Et on ne peut pas aborder un carton de plus de Justin Trudeau. Donc, si on veut avoir les résultats différents, on doit faire des choix différents, on doit faire des décisions différentes, on doit voter différents. Donc, je vous encourage de voter différent dans cette élection, voter pour l'NPD. On veut faire face à cette crise climatique avec tous nos efforts, avec tout mon cœur, et on peut le faire et on va le faire.
Just if I could follow up, so the Liberal plan is $50 per ton in 2022, rising to $170 per ton by 2030. What is going to be the NDP's price on carbon to reach your targets?
I really want to be clear on this. Whatever Mr. Trudeau says, he can put any plan out there. What is the point of believing in him when he doesn't believe in his own plans? Because if he did, he would spend 2 more years fighting for them. If he actually believed in fighting the climate crisis, why did he call an election instead? We could have continued for 2 more years. It's really important for people to acknowledge, how can we take a really serious, honest look at his plan? When just 2 years ago, he made it really clear that pharmacare was one of his #1 priorities. It was a major priority. He included it in throne speech. He said it was important, but then he completely abandoned it, and in his fully costed plan, there's not a single dollar, not a single cent on fighting the climate crisis or fighting for bringing in pharmacare. So it's clear we can't believe Mr. Trudeau on the climate crisis. You can believe us. We care deeply. We'll do whatever it takes. We're not afraid of the big polluters. We're not going to cave into the big oil and gas industry as Mr. Trudeau has. It really comes down to our commitment and our conviction. We are committed and have the conviction to fight this climate crisis because we care deeply and we are committed to doing it.
Prochaine question, Sébastien Desrosiers de Radio-Canada.
Bonjour, Monsieur Singh. Des maires de 5 grandes villes au Québec tiennent un point de presse ce matin, Montréal, Québec, Laval, Longueuil et Gatineau, pour demander aux chefs des partis fédéraux de s'engager à réduire le trafic d'armes illégales au Québec. En fait, ils demandent deux choses, de réduire le nombre d'armes qui traversent les frontières, qui est évidemment du ressort du gouvernement fédéral, puis ils demandent également que la responsabilité du contrôle de ces armes-là ne revienne pas aux municipalités. Quel est votre plan? Vous dites vouloir bannir les armes d'assaut, réduire le nombre d'armes illégales en circulation. Quel est votre plan et voulez-vous rendre un programme de rachat obligatoire, par exemple? Qu'est-ce que vous répondez à ces maires-là?
Okay. Merci beaucoup pour la question. Premièrement, je comprends pourquoi les municipalités ont se rassemblé pour mettre en œuvre ou pour proposer cette demande, ou pour montrer ces demandes, parce que on a un grand problème de violence causée par les armes à feu et ça frappe fort dans les grandes municipalités, les grands centres urbains. On a vu ça ici à Toronto, au Québec. On a vu des actes de violence récemment, donc je comprends pourquoi c'est vraiment une grave inquiétude. Donc notre plan, oui, on est pour un rachat obligatoire des armes d'assaut parce qu'on veut protéger la population et ça veut dire qu'on veut mettre en œuvre un programme qui fonctionne pour les interdire, pas un programme volontaire, mais un programme obligatoire. Deuxièmement, M. Trudeau a promis de faire ça. Il a promis de mettre en œuvre un programme de rachat obligatoire, une interdiction, mais il ne l'a pas fait. Donc oui, on veut le faire. On veut aussi investir plus de ressources dans nos services qui travaillent sur la frontière pour arrêter le transport illégal de ces armes, parce qu'on sait que le grand montant de ces armes traverse la frontière, donc plus de ressources, plus de travailleurs et travailleuses peuvent nous aider dans cette lutte.
Ce matin, on apprend que sur Radio-Canada que des écoles du sud-ouest de l'Ontario se sont débarrassées de milliers de livres qui, selon ce conseil scolaire, nuisent à la réconciliation, entretiennent des stéréotypes sur les Autochtones, des livres comme des bandes dessinées d'Astérix, par exemple, qui ont été brûlées dans certains cas. Est-ce que vous êtes favorable avec cette façon de faire?
J'ai réfléchi sur cette question un peu parce que je la lis en avant et j'ai pensé de qu'est-ce qu'on était appris dans l'école des communautés autochtones. C'était quoi les leçons qu'on a appris et c'était quoi notre approche, nos idées sur la communauté autochtone quand on était jeune. Et je pense que j'ai vu des images négatives, des caricatures, une présentation qui ne respecte la dignité de les communautés autochtones. Donc, je pense qu'on doit vraiment changer notre approche dans l'enceinte de nos enfants. Et une réflexion sur cette question, c'est important. Qu'est-ce qu'on peut faire pour améliorer comment on présente l'histoire de la communauté autochtone, comment on peut mieux enseigner nos enfants de l'histoire, de leur contribution, de leur vie, de comment ils ont vécu des grandes injustices. Donc cette réflexion, c'est important de faire et c'est quelque chose que je pense qu'on doit faire.
Could you repeat the question on mayors and guns in English, please?
Yes, on mayors and guns. this is I can understand why some mayors in Quebec have come together to demand action on assault weapons and hand. They're worried because they're seeing gun violence. We've seen it here in Toronto. We've seen it in Quebec. So it is really serious. And so what we're proposing is we would support a mandatory buyback of assault weapons. It's something Mr. Trudeau had said he would do. It's something that advocates have demanded, and Mr. Trudeau backed away from that commitment. We would bring in a mandatory buyback so that we could absolutely ban these assault weapons. They should be banned, and that mandatory buyback would help us get there. In terms of stopping the flow of weapons, what the mayors have outlined is what we've found as well, is that the largest quantity or the biggest proportion of weapons that are coming illegally into Canada are coming across the border. So we need to invest, and what we're proposing to do is invest more resources and staffing and human resources into our border security to make sure that we are doing everything we can to stop the flow of those weapons. Those are some of the things we can do immediately to respond to those demands and to do our part to fight the gun violence that's going on.
Next question from John Chidley Hill, Canadian Press.
Good morning, Mr. Singh.
Morning.
My question for you is, why are you now hedging on canceling the TMX pipeline extension?
I've been opposed to this project. I think it's the wrong thing to do, and I've always been opposed to it.
We're facing, obviously, a science-based crisis right now with the COVID-19 pandemic. Climate change is also a science-based crisis. In both cases, misinformation has really slowed our progress. What would you do to fight misinformation in climate change?
I really appreciate the question. I think there is certainly a lot of misinformation out there when it comes to many things, COVID-19 as well as the climate. This is where the more trust people have in our institutions, the better it is. And what we can do is more transparency, providing people with a background where information is coming from, being really clear on the evidence. The evidence is clear. We're seeing the scientists around the world, the vast majority of scientists have come together, the United Nations reports, and have said that human activity is increasing emissions, which is directly causing the climate to change, and it is directly contributing to the extreme weather we're seeing. And we are living the reality of that. So providing more transparency, more information, committing more time to education around this, and then talking about the solutions. I think what happens also is when we talk about the problem, without emphasizing the solutions, people end up feeling a lot of despair and a lot of hopelessness and then don't know if they can do anything about it. We know if we made the right decisions, we could tackle the three biggest causes of emissions. Producing energy, we can invest in renewable energy. Transportation, like we're doing today, we can invest in public transit and electrifying that transportation and making it easier to access, more affordable. And we know that the way we heat and cool our homes and buildings is another one of the large contributors to the greenhouse gas. Improve that, the way we heat and cool our homes and buildings. We could do our part, we can actually fight this crisis and we can win. So really it comes down to better information, better education, and then really emphasizing that there are solutions and that Mr. Trudeau's approach has been a failure and people cannot afford another 4 years of that. People have to vote differently if they want different results. And we are committed to fighting this crisis. We can create good jobs, we can fight the crisis, we can build a better future.
Next question, Jamie Tumulty from City TV.
Hey, Mr. Leader, good morning.
Good morning.
I heard your answer when you were asked about the people that threw rocks at the Prime Minister. But these were anti-vaxxers that tried to assault the people on the bus and assault our Prime